In a sense, what he's saying, this is a very generalized way to look at it. There are many exceptions. But on general, if you actually adjust for educational amount and specific type of job, how long you've been in it, whether you stay there, have kids or not, that in those situations, when all these other factors are taken into account, by and large, women earn as much or more than men for comparable work. Mm-hmm. So this actually becomes the opportunity that is being talked about when, if you want to choose to actually do those other things in those jobs that maybe you didn't want to do previously, you can make as much or more money than men in comparable jobs. So the so-called gap is not that there's a discrimination gap. It's that men or women can get these jobs, but you have to do these other things that are probably going to take away from life quality. And that men, for whatever reasons, have been more willing to do that, and we can discuss that as well. But if women want to get into that game, they have an advantage, actually. Mm-hmm. So that's this is part of what started to come out of this kind of research.
Mm-hmm. And the fascinating thing was that education, if you control for education alone, it has very little impact. Meaning that because women and men choose different types of education. So one of the first 10 reasons that I looked at of the 25 ways to higher pay, 10 of them focused on the choices that men and women make around the type of education they get. So if you look at a man who has a BA and a woman who has a BA, the chances are considerably good that the man will earn considerably more with the BA than the woman will earn with the BA. But if you now narrow that down to engineers with male versus female engineers, and then you narrow that down to the type of engineer who earns more money or the type of engineer who earns less money, the type of engineer who earns more money is usually the type of engineer where the job is less fulfilling, has a whole series of other characteristics that are attached to it. Then you control for that, and then you put those starting salaries together. Then you find that there's over 80 fields in which women earn considerably more than men do. But the important part of that was that when one makes an assumption of discrimination, you put your focus on you put your binoculars on the ways in which a woman is discriminated against, and you don't inform women of the 80 fields that they can go into in which they can earn more than the man does. So you keep women ignorant of those opportunities, or you keep women ignorant of the areas where there's a transformation happening because of technology that leads to formerly male-dominated fields like the steel industry becoming increasingly female-friendly because of what technology has done to the physical hard labor that used to be involved in that industry that is now phasing out of that industry. And so there's this, what I discovered in the process of researching the book were just thousands of opportunities that we hadn't put our focus on because we were not focusing on the opportunity part for females. But I also learned a great deal else, which is that hazardous jobs are one major difference between males and females. 93% of the people who are killed at work are males. And if you take a hazardous job, normally speaking, women stay away from it, men go into it. Usually don't pay a great deal, but at least they're a job as opposed to not having a job. But when you look more carefully at hazardous jobs, there's a lot of fascinating findings there. So, for example, I live right near a Marine post in San Diego, and every day I was seeing on how many Marines had died, but I was never able to find a female Marine among them. But yet, 15% of the people who join the armed services are female. So I started inquiring about that, and found that there hasn't been one female Marine killed in the war in Iraq. Nor has there been one female Air Force person killed in the war in Iraq. And there's only been one Navy person killed. But there's been quite a few Army females killed in the war in Iraq. So what I was learning was that by taking the binoculars off of discrimination alone and looking at things like this, I was discovering I was asking myself a different question, which is, how is it that our daughters can go into the armed services and have only a minuscule fraction of the chance of being killed versus our sons? and which portion of the armed services is more likely to protect them than other portions. So if we have a daughter who's really inclined to go into the armed services, how can we direct her in a way that we don't see for next Christmas a body bag rather than our daughter? And so, and then why was it? What is it that women do in the workplace that leads them to less likelihood of being harmed? And can men learn from that? And it turns out that the answer to that was the wrong question. That is, it's not what women can do in the workplace. The truth is that in hazardous work environments, women and men do a male-female dance in which women seek out safety and men protect women from hazards. The men compete to protect the women to be safer and to give them safer choices, and the women compete for safer choices. So we can learn a lot from women, and we can learn, and men can learn a lot from the unnecessary types of preparations for risk-taking that we do that encourage us to prove ourselves more of a male by taking more risks. So there's so much that opens up to learn from each other in the process of just looking at these types of issues. Let me work with the love, sex, power issue for a moment. Up until like the 1950s in industrialized cultures, basically the society, everything that was focused, all societies focused on how do we get survival to happen. The leader was not men or women. The leader, the oppressor, if you will, which was not an oppressor, it was what freed us to survive, was the dictates of survival. And up until the 1950s, basically, the society learned that in order to survive, you basically had to tell women that you would only be loved, respected, and approved of if you had children, and if you raised those children, and you might die raising those children. And men, your obligation was to be willing to die in war to protect what a woman bore. And so or die in a coal mine or die in a work environment. And so still to this day, men are far more likely to be willing to die at work in order to do those things that create that income and create the protection for the family. But there was a big difference between what we did with men and with women and the dynamic of that. We never said to women that nurturing your family was power. We told men that feeling obligated to earn money that someone else would spend while you die sooner is power. Now, no woman would be stupid enough to buy that definition, but the combination of male and female socialization encouraged men to think of themselves as if I was willing to go to war and be willing to die. If I was willing to take the risk of defending my community, be a hero. The word hero derives from the word hero, which is from which we get words like servant and slave and protector, all come etymologically from the word hero. If we were willing to be a servant and a slave and protect the community, we would call ourselves more powerful. So when a man first goes into the armed services, he hasn't been accountable, responsible, obligated, or been willing to die, and so he's called a private, and he's barely paid anything. And then as he takes more responsibility, more willingness to die, more risks, and supervises more people and encourages more people to do the same, he's paid more and given higher and higher ranks. So the pay was the bribe. We paid people to do things that disempowered them for the purpose of empowering them in other ways, including getting love if you're a man. So the message to the man was, there's no hope of you having love if you don't have money. So you go to any Jane Austen novel, any reading of history, the man who had no property or who didn't or had no potential had no what? He had no love. He may have had sex, but if he was really good looking, but he wouldn't get long-term love. Eventually, the job of the society was to persuade particularly the attractive woman to give up the man who didn't have property or potential for earning money. And so that he eventually would learn that if he couldn't produce that money, if he didn't obligate himself to produce income and to risk dying, he wouldn't have a female companion, he wouldn't have love, stability, being cared for the rest of his life. Now, those produce qualities in men. The qualities that are produced in men is that if you think about what it takes to succeed at work, many of the qualities that it takes to succeed at work are inversely related to the qualities it takes to love. If I am a good attorney or a good CEO and you're making a sales presentation to me, I listen for a couple of seconds to what you're saying, and I try to, as you're making the sales presentation, say, will this work overseas? Is there any competition that's better? Is there any people that can do this better than you? Are there any other products that I could use more effectively? Will this have a chance of backfiring? What's the upside? What's the downside?
Romantic.
I have to be thinking about 30 or 40 other things to be a good CEO. To be a good attorney, I have to be listening for a couple of seconds, picking up the gist of what you say, and experimenting in my mind's eye with all the ways I can shoot you down as soon as you pause. So, but those skills, if I take those home and you're my wife, and I listen to you for a couple of seconds and try to think of 30 other things, or the ways I can correct what you're saying in order to, I've made the world's worst husband. If you're my daughter and I'm doing the same thing, I've made the world's worst father. So the qualities it takes to succeed at work often led us to receive less real love from the people from whom we wanted love. The less love we had, the more we had a wound, a hole, that we needed love more. So there was a vacuum that was created in us as we were successful, but we created what I call the father's catch-22. Fathers learn to love their family by being away from the love of their family and do things that made them less lovable in order to do what they needed to do to love their family. And we learned to call that power. And if we did it well, we got blamed for being the oppressor. And if we didn't do it well enough, we were invisible. Nobody wanted us. We were not lovable. So it wasn't just sex that we got for money. It was also love that we got for money. Because women learned to love within the framework of what made them secure and made them respectful of the man. Respect for the man and security from the man oftentimes generated and catalyzed within many women feelings of love. Now, this does not mean 100%. But what it does mean is that the man learned that the chances of love were better that way. So it was like why women want to lose weight, because they know that if they're 300 pounds, the chances, there may be a man out there that will love them, but the chances of love are better if they're 110 pounds than 300 pounds. So we go on diets, or we do other forms of makeup. Makeup is basically what women use to make up the gap between the power they have and the power they'd like to have. Males have makeup also. What's male makeup? No, actually, Viagra disempowers the man. But if you know what I mean, I know that you were joking. What is male makeup? Coat and tie. Cars. Car. I am Dr. Warren Farrell, best-selling author. This is Ken Wilber, who's in charge of this. A lot of things. A lot of and the more he's in charge of, the more that's his makeup. So.
You are listening to www.interrelated.org.